Hey there and welcome back to NBA 2K18's My League mode. My name is Pete and today we complete an action-packed episode of our My League expansion series, an episode that will take us all the way through November as the Louisville Legionnaires seek to continue the hot streak that they started the season with. With a 7-2 record, the Legionnaires currently sit at the top of the Eastern Conference. However, that could change in the next game against the 76ers, who in the last episode already handed us a very tough loss just a few days ago. Before we jump into that though, I want to answer a question that has popped up from time to time. Some of you guys wanted to know how the Las Vegas Aces are doing, so let's have a quick look at the second expansion team in the league. Now, the sample size is fairly small, but I think it's safe to say the Aces are once again not in a great spot this season. With 7 losses out of 9 games, they are currently in a 3-way tie for the last place in the West, and looking at their roster, a big win streak is unlikely to happen anytime soon. Still, the future doesn't look too bad for the Aces. In Nick George and Duane Freeman, they have 2 top 10 picks in the starting lineup. That is of course not going to win them any championships soon, but I think it is a very solid foundation to build upon. One more very interesting thing, former Legionnaire Kyle Kuzma has also joined the Aces in the offseason, but he currently comes off the bench for them as the backup behind Kent Bazemore. The rough start for the Aces might also have something to do with injuries, as another offseason signing was the addition of George Hill, who promptly suffered an ankle sprain and was out of action. Both him and Will Barton are currently not playing for the Aces. Once both of them are fully healthy though, the roster should look a bit more competitive, even though I'm fairly sure the Aces will once again finish the season in one of the lower spots of the Western Conference. Now back to the Legionnaires and back to the game against Philadelphia. The Sixers are still missing power forward Paul Millsap, but at least in the first half, just like in the last game, that didn't seem to bother them all that much. Also, just like in the last game, the majority of their points in the first half came from 3. This time, however, the Legionnaires themselves were able to hold their own. Anthony Davis got off to a good start. Overall, it was a very competitive first half, and at halftime, the Legionnaires even have a small 3-point lead. In the second half, then things went in a different direction. The Legionnaires went absolutely crazy and started dominating on both ends of the court. They outscored the Sixers by 36 points in the second half. They played a very fast-paced game and that gave Philly a lot of trouble. The Legionnaires also finished the game with 12 steals and 14 blocks as a team, and that stellar defense was helped by some very good shooting numbers as well, ultimately resulting in a dominant 39-point victory. Richardson and Davis both finished the game with 22 points, Davis probably with the better performance though. He also added 9 rebounds and his shooting percentage was spectacular. Another strong candidate for statline of the night though, that was Bamba, who finished with a 13-point, 15-rebound double-double, and who also added 2 steals and 7 rejections. Tyler Ulis then found back to his form as a floor general today. Admittedly, he didn't score much, but he finished this matchup with a game-high 9 assists. So the Legionnaires win the rematch against Philadelphia and now have a busy 4-game week ahead of them. We start things off against the San Antonio Spurs, who are, at least in terms of their overall rating, still one of the strongest teams in the league, and with Kawhi Leonard they also still have one of the best players in the NBA on the roster. However, they have a huge problem at the center position, where they have a 71 overall rookie starting, who does not have a single playable backup option off the bench. And against a frontcourt heavy team like ours, that is a recipe for disaster, and so the end result is no surprise in this one. We exploited the hold down low perfectly. For the majority of the game the paint was wide open, and when it wasn't, our 3-pointers were falling. One guy who ran especially hot from deep was Mitch Dennis, who scored a game-high 27 points in only 19 minutes, and who made the majority of his points from behind the 3-point or the free throw line. Bamba then once again with an impressive double-double with 18 points and 15 rebounds. Andre Flanders only missed 3 shots on his way to 18 points as well. Richardson also once again in double figures with 15. The only guy I wasn't happy with in this game was Anthony Davis, who despite the weak defense missed shot after shot, and who finished the game with only 8 points and a 25% shooting performance. So the Legionnaires now on a 3-game win streak heading into their game against the Washington Wizards, who despite a very solid core currently occupy the last place in the Eastern Conference. Still, especially their backup duo of Wall and Beal is not to be underestimated, and even though the team is also missing Otto Porter due to injury, I have a feeling they could play a bit better than their record suggests. In the end though, the Wizards' struggle continued, but our victory did not come without any sacrifices. Anthony Davis fouled out of the game after just 19 minutes of playing time, Mohamed Bamba picked up an unfortunate injury, and backup center Deontay Davis also had foul trouble, so we fielded some fairly unusual rotations. In the end though, it was still enough to get the win. Once again, a very good night from Mitch Dennis, who stayed hot from deep and finished the game with 17 points, followed by Brice Johnson with 15 and 7, and Josh Richardson was once again unusually strong on the boards, where he racked up 9 rebounds to go along with his 14 points. Andre Flanders, Rodney Hood, Tyler Hewlett and Mo Bamba, that is the list of players who also scored in double figures tonight. Anthony Davis sadly missed out on that with a pretty bad performance. In the 19 minutes he played before fouling out, he missed all 6 of his shots, and he also left a few valuable points at the free throw line. In the end though, the rest of the team stepped up, and so luckily his performance tonight did not hurt us that much. Like I said though, we picked up an injury in this one, and it is once again Mohamed Bamba who will now miss a few games. A pulled bicep is luckily nothing to get too worried about. Still, I think it's better to give him some rest, so we don't risk making the injury worse. The changes to our lineup are fairly straightforward. Anthony Davis will now switch down to center for a few games, Brice Johnson jumps into the starting lineup next to him, and Festus Ezeli gets a few minutes off the bench as well, just so we don't overwork our big man. With that rotation, we are now ready to host the Miami Heat in the next game, and they are a bit of an unfortunate opponent here. They have a very good frontcourt here with Marvin Bagley and Hassan Whiteside, while down low for the Legionnaires, things were off to a rocky start fairly quickly. Bamba's presence on defense was definitely missed, but AD once again also could not stay out of foul trouble. He once again had to leave the game with 6 personal fouls, and with our frontcourt options reduced to the minimum, even a strong Andre Flanders couldn't help. So in a very close finish, the Heat take the game and hand the Legionnaires their 3rd loss of the regular season. Andre Flanders undoubtedly with the stat line of the night with 27 points, 7 rebounds, 2 assists and 2 steals, and Anthony Davis was on track for a good night as well, but due to his foul trouble he had to sit down after 22 minutes of action and was only able to finish the game with 17 points, 5 rebounds and 2 blocks. Still, despite the loss, 5 more players were able to score in double figures. In the end though, it just wasn't enough to get the victory tonight. Wrapping up the week is now a home game against the Brooklyn Nets, who actually have themselves a fairly presentable backcourt with D'Angelo Russell and the recently signed Jamal Murray. However, as a team overall, I would consider them to be fairly mediocre, which is also reflected by their 7-6 record. Now, believe it or not, Anthony Davis managed to foul out again in this one. This is now the 3rd time in a row, and I start to suspect that something is wrong here, and with AD out, the game came down to the wire. Down by 2, Andre Flanders manages to get himself to the free throw line, and he stays cool and converts both attempts to tie the game with 10 seconds left. Brooklyn now takes a timeout and afterwards inbounds the ball to D'Angelo Russell, and after a few passes it lands in the hands of Murray. He drives and takes a lightly contested mid-range jumper. That one misses, Louisville ends up with the rebound, and we immediately take our final timeout. Only 0.8 seconds are left on the clock, time for some late game heroics. And off the inbounds play we get a good screen for Hewlett, who then sinks the mid-range jumper as the buzzer sounds. Not clear yet whether or not he did get it off in time though, so the referees look at the replay for this one, and that one confirms that the ball leaves Hewlett's hands before the buzzer sounds, and that means the Louisville Legionnaires win the game by 2 points after a big shot from their point guard. And despite the fact that both Richardson and Flanders led the team in scoring tonight, Hewlett was the man of the match. Not only did he win the game for us, but he also finished with a big double-double. 15 points, 10 rebounds, not a single turnover and only 2 missed shots. Hewlett undoubtedly put the team on his back tonight and delivered. So the Legionnaires remain the 1st seed in the East, and the new week begins with a trip to Detroit. Now, the Pistons not only have 1st overall pick Deshaun Stephens running the point, who is, by the way, currently the 2nd leading scorer among all rookies, but the Pistons also have former Legionnaire Skal Labissière. For some reason, Labissière is not starting, but he could do some damage off the bench, so he's definitely a player to watch out for. Pistons big man Andre Drummond, meanwhile, will miss the game with an injury, which could definitely make things a bit easier for us. For this game, I also moved Brice Johnson back to the bench and started Deontay Davis instead. This should hopefully take some defensive pressure off Anthony Davis, so maybe he can manage to stay out of foul trouble for once. That game plan also worked pretty well in the 1st quarter, not so much however in the remaining 3. For the most part it was a close game, but in the end the Pistons unfortunately take home a victory, as the Legionnaires lose by only 4 points. Very interesting, by the way, the Pistons' top scorer in this game, another former Legionnaire, Davis Bertans. Bertans was scorching hot from deep and finished the game with 22 points, good enough for a team-high scoring performance. However, the game high once again went to Josh Richardson, who finished with a fantastic versatile stat line with 25 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals and 2 blocks. Rodney Hood and Brice Johnson contributed 18 and 17 points respectively. Anthony Davis, meanwhile, actually managed to stay in the game. His final stat line: 13 points, 7 rebounds and 4 blocks. Definitely good numbers, but I would have liked to see a bit more from him. Moving on, we now host the Indiana Pacers at home, who are also plagued by an injury, as superstar Kevin Durant is currently missing time with a strained Achilles. And long story short, without Durant, Indiana's game plan seemed to fall apart entirely. Both their offense and their defense looked absolutely horrendous in this game. The Legionnaires were able to shoot an incredible 72% from the field. They even made 76% of their attempts from three-point range and simply dominated the Pacers from start to finish. Our three top scorers all had fantastic shooting performances. Richardson, Flanders and Dennis only missed a combined 8 of their 33 shot attempts. Combined, they also went 12 of 14 from deep, and like I said, Indiana put up very little resistance. AD, meanwhile, once again with a troublesome night. Fouls were once again an issue for him, but the reason he only played 15 minutes tonight was a different one. Davis suffered a hyperextended left knee in the first half, and with that, both him and Bamba will now spend time on the injured list. Both are only listed as day-to-day and should hopefully be back soon, but for the next game we have to switch things up a bit with Brice Johnson and Deontay Davis in the starting lineup, and Danny Green also moves into the rotation to get minutes at small forward, while at least for the next game Mitch Dennis will be heavily featured as a stretch 4. Now thankfully that next game is against the Pelicans, who are undoubtedly one of the worst teams in the league at the moment. It's a bit sad that AD won't be able to play against his former team. Still, even with him and Bamba missing, we were in control of this one. A 14-point lead after the first quarter was hard to come back from. The end result here looks a bit closer than the game actually was. The Pelicans didn't stand much of a chance in this one, as the Legionnaires cruised to regular season victory number 13. Our two starting wings, Richardson and Hood, led the team in scoring with 20 points each, and especially Hood had a fantastic night, shooting 7 of 10 from the field and also adding 5 rebounds, 3 assists and 3 blocks. In total, we had 6 guys who scored in double figures, and I also want to briefly mention Brice Johnson and Deontay Davis, who, with our starting big man out, definitely stepped up in this one. Both of them were very efficient from the field and even came close to a double-double, finishing with 14 points and 8 rebounds. Now thankfully we have a full week of rest before we travel to Washington for the next game, and that is also enough for both Davis and Bamba to heal their injuries, so the two of them are back in the starting lineup. Deontay Davis and Brice Johnson move back to the bench, while Festus Ezeli and Danny Green both slide out of the rotation. Now the last game against the Wizards isn't too far back. In that one they were missing Otto Porter and lost to us. Today Porter was back in the Wizards lineup, but the end result remained the same. And this game right here might have been Anthony Davis' breakout performance as a Legionnaire. He already had 7 points and 11 rebounds in the first quarter. Both him and Josh Richardson absolutely dominated this game and propelled the Legionnaires to another victory to reclaim the first seed in the Eastern Conference. Richardson, our scoring leader in this one with 32 points on stellar shooting efficiency. The stat line of the night, however, undoubtedly belongs to Davis, who, returning from his injury, was an absolute beast inside, finishing the game with 23 points and 26 rebounds. Added to that are 3 steals and 2 rejections. AD came to feast tonight and was without a doubt the Legionnaires' MVP in this game. Another honorable mention goes to Mr. Reliable off the bench. Brice Johnson with 21 points, 7 rebounds and 3 blocks had another fantastic game and once again proves to be more than worthy of his playing time. So, second to last game of the month and already the final game of this week, we host the Oklahoma City Thunder next. Our first matchup at the beginning of the month resulted in a double-digit victory for the Legionnaires, and things aren't looking too bad for this one either. The Thunder, who made the finals last season, still with a horrible 6-13 record. Both Paul George and Gerald Henderson will miss this game with injuries, which could make things a lot easier for our wing players. Admittedly though, even with both of them in the lineup, the Thunder have been playing pretty badly. They just don't have enough depth behind their stars, and that also once again showed in this game. Westbrook did as much as he could, but we are also still running Rodney Hood at point guard for stretches, and especially in those moments there was not much Westbrook could do. Meanwhile, the Legionnaires scored fairly evenly. Once again we had 6 guys with double-digit scoring performances on our way to a 34-point victory. Our top scorer for the night, the familiar face of Josh Richardson. His 24 points on 8 of 11 shooting, once again a fantastic performance. Another good one came once again from Brice Johnson, who finished with 19 points including 11 trips to the free throw line, while Andre Flanders showed some versatility with 16 points, 6 rebounds and 4 assists, while Anthony Davis once again double-doubled, although not as spectacular as in the previous game. So the Legionnaires continue to sit at the top of the Eastern Conference as we head into the final game of the episode. This will already be our third matchup with the Bulls this season. The season series is currently split evenly at 1 win apiece. Let's see who can take the lead in this one. Now, as is tradition against the Bulls, 2K once again decided it was a good idea to let both teams play in white, so my apologies for the slightly confusing footage here. Overall, the game was incredibly competitive from start to finish. The matchup of AD versus Cousins was fantastic to watch. In the end, it was Cousins though who had the upper hand, as his Bulls win a nail-biter on the road 87-86. AD still was our top scorer for the night with another double-double. I admit I was doubting him somewhat at the beginning of the season, but if he can continue with those kinds of performances that he showed in the last few games, then I'm really looking forward to where he can take the Legionnaires this season. Next to Davis, the only stat line that is somewhat worth mentioning is Bamba's, who barely missed a double-double but still put up good numbers with 9 points, 12 rebounds, 2 steals and 2 blocks. And with that, the month of November is complete. Despite that loss, the Legionnaires remain at the top of the East. However, their lead isn't all that big and we still have more than 60 games left to play. Out west, by the way, the Timberwolves lead with the exact same record, followed very closely by the Suns and Trailblazers. For the month of November, we unfortunately did not win any Player of the Month awards. However, Anthony Davis received Player of the Week honors for the previous week. Admittedly, we only played 2 games in that stretch, but one of them was his 2020 game, so I would say the award is well deserved. As we now have about a quarter of the season already behind us, I think it's also a good time to look at some stats. So what follows is, as usual without commentary, a quick look at our player stats. So if you're interested in that, feel free to pause and have a closer look. Otherwise, I'll be back in just a few seconds. And here we are, winter is upon us, the month of December has begun. Next episode we start things off with a doubleheader against the Jazz, and we'll see how the Legionnaires will be able to finish off the year. For the moment, I am understandably very happy with how the team plays. Like I said earlier, it took some time for Anthony Davis to find his groove. He seems to be on the right track though. In the meantime, both Richardson and Johnson are doing formidable jobs keeping our offensive production high, and I think if the Legionnaires can continue down that path, they are in a very good spot. For today, we will now make the cut right here. If you liked the episode, then I would of course be happy if you could leave a thumbs up. And if you want to support the channel, then you can either subscribe if you haven't already, or you can support the Pete Complete Patreon. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!